FCNYC. My name is Ben Chan. I'm here with Dominic Mauro, which means it's time to talk about mixed martial arts. And we are going to recap UFC 144, UFC in Japan. And the main event card started out with Anthony Pettis knocking out Joe Lauzon in the first round.
Yeah, we really didn't get to see much of either fighter in this fight, but it was a really impressive knockout. Anthony Pettis proved again how much of a dangerous striker he is at 155. His wrestling, you can talk about it. Clay Guida just sort of, proved that Clay Guida will lie on anybody if he can. But Anthony Pettis, he's got some striking. Lauzon made a single mistake, guessing leg kick instead of head kick, and he caught the shin right on his chin and went to sleep. So, really unfortunate for Joe Lauzon. He was really riding that hype train after defeating Melvin Gillard.
So what's next for Pettis?
Well, Pettis was the last WEC lightweight champion, and he took a tune-up fight before fighting Frankie Edgar, a guy named Clay Guida, who defeated him and derailed his whole championship challenge dreams. So I think now he's really got a claim to fight the lightweight champion in the UFC, especially because it's the guy that he beat to become the last WEC champion, Benson Henderson. We're going to cover that fight later on down the show.
Mm-hmm. And then in the next fight, we had a much improved Hatsu Hioki defeating Bart Palaszewski.
Yeah, he looked like a completely different fighter. Hioki, in his first UFC fight against George Roop, he looked kind of sluggish. He looked a little lost, even on the ground, which is supposed to be his big strength. I don't know what it was, whether it was nerves, whether it was jet lag, whether, he really wasn't used to fighting a guy as tall as Roop. Hioki looked like garbage in his first fight, which he, narrowly won, a disputed decision. But here, he just destroyed. He walked right through Bart Palaszewski. Palaszewski, he's a veteran. He's been around for like 50 fights at this point. He's no, pushover. But Hioki just made him look like a goon on the ground. At one point at the end of the first round, Hioki, went for the triangle. He decided to chain it to the armbar, and then he changed that into an omoplata. Just beautiful, seamless transitions to submissions. And Palaszewski stayed with him, to his credit, but that's all Palaszewski could do on the ground was survive. Hioki passed his guard at will. Hioki just looked fantastic. That's all you can say in this fight.
So the Iron Broom dominates the ground game.
Yeah, apparently that's where the game comes from. He is not to be messed with on the ground. Some folks have been, clamoring for him to get an immediate title shot against Jose Aldo, but I don't know. I think he's only looked, serviceable in one of his UFC fights, even though he looked really good in that fight. Let's see him against some real top-tier talent at 145 before we start feeding him to, the guy that looks invincible at 145. I'd like to see Hioki prove that he can fight in America as well as Japan. Whatever the reason.
And then in the next fight, the audience was treated to an all-time comeback when Tim Boetsch, after being dominated for 2 rounds by Yushin Okami, came back and won the fight.
Yeah, I said before the fight that I didn't really see a path to victory for Tim Boetsch, and for 2 rounds, Yushin Okami proved me right. He dominated Boetsch on the feet, he dominated Boetsch on the ground, he ended the second round in mount, just raining down punishment on Boetsch, and then Tim Boetsch knocked him out. I don't understand. He caught Okami with a good right straight, and then, Okami sort of staggered a little bit, and Boetsch smelled blood and went for it. Yeah. Like vintage Vanderlei Silva went for it. Like he was just all over Okami. Didn't give him an inch to move, just didn't give him any space whatsoever, and knocked out Okami at the beginning of the 3rd round.
It looked like Okami just panicked in there.
Yeah, this is his first fight back after getting knocked out in embarrassing fashion by Anderson Silva. Like everybody does.
Right.
But, Okami, yeah, he got hit and he got on his bike, and he didn't do a good job running away, but he didn't put up his hands, so he's running away with his hands down, with his hands out, panicking. And, Okami, the best wrestler at 185, says you are the best wrestler at 185. Chael Sonnen is a big fan of your wrestling. Where's the takedown when you're hurt, buddy? That's what every wrestler does. Pat Barry, the kickboxer, who jokes about how bad his grappling is, and he says, if I get hurt, you will see some white belt jiu-jitsu. I will take that guy down. Where are you? No takedowns, just stand in front of Boetsch and get knocked out. Mm-hmm. Boetsch has some power, and he showed it.
Mm-hmm. And then in the next fight, we had Jake Shields out hustling Yoshihiro Akiyama.
Yeah, this is one of those funny fights where I feel like Akiyama looked like the better fighter for the entire 15 minutes. I mean, his striking was really crisp. He had a good jab. His counters were timed really well. And his judo throws were just amazing. I mean, Jake Shields looked like he was auditioning for Cirque du Soleil at points. I mean, he was just soaring through the air. And yet, Jake Shields wins just an uncontested unanimous decision, 30-27 on all three judges' scorecards, because Akiyama doesn't work enough. I mean, Akiyama looked good in spurts when he fought, but he was just content to stand in front of Shields for most of the fight. And Shields, I wouldn't say picked him apart with jabs. I mean, Shields has a terrible pawing jab, and the leg kicks were getting checked all the time, but those are strikes and they add up, and that's, trying to win the fight, whereas Akiyama posing with the cool, hands in front of Shields isn't really going to cut it. So I think if Akiyama had just increased his work rate to even, close to where Jake Shields was working, we'd be talking about how good Akiyama looked in his debut at 170. And instead, we're looking at a guy who's lost 4 straight in the UFC. And that's tough for Akiyama.
Yeah, and then in the next fight, we had a fight between two heavyweights that didn't do much work because it ended in a first round knockout. We had Mark Hunt knocking out Cheick Kongo.
Yeah, this fight was a lot of fun. I'm a big fan of Mark Hunt from back in the Pride days. He's definitely over the hill. I mean, his legendary chin has sort of been, shattered at this point. But man, what a fun fight watching him knock out Cheick Kongo. I thought before the fight that Cheick Kongo, he's not over the hill. I mean, he's a gatekeeper for sure, but he's a good kickboxer too. And Hunt, dropped him with a jab walking backwards, just, really nicely timed. And then knocked him out with some, I'm not going to say Boetsch-esque, but, he swarmed Cheick Kongo when he felt he was hurt with a hook, a couple of hooks. So, Mark Hunt, actually kind of relevant. I mean, look, Cheick Kongo is a gatekeeper at heavyweight. He's just a striker. So when you can outstrike the striking gatekeeper, that means you're in the top tier by default. So bizarrely, Dana White said that Mark Hunt is in the mix for a title shot at 265 in the year 2012. Strange things.
Right, and then in the next fight, we had Ryan Bader getting back into the mix, getting a much-needed victory against Quinton Rampage Jackson.
Yeah, after defeats to John Jones and Tito Ortiz, Bader was desperate for a win, and defeating Rampage Jackson is, a really good name to have on your resume. Although less so these days. I mean, Rampage showed up 5 pounds overweight. He had a visible belly walking into the ring. I mean, he says that he still wants to fight. He said he just signed a new 6-fight contract, about a year ago with the UFC, but it doesn't look like Rampage really cares about fighting anymore. He makes a lot more money in movies than he does fighting, and he doesn't have to get hit in the face for real in his movies. He can hire a stunt double to have that done. Mm-hmm. The one shining moment in this fight was Rampage getting a slam on Ryan Bader. He looked like the old Quinton Rampage Jackson. It was very nice to see in front of the Japanese crowd. He used to slam people all the time in Pride, and then just became a boxer when he came into the UFC. So it was a nice little trip down memory lane, but Bader won a really boring decision over Rampage. So neither guy really comes out looking good in the fight. Bader beat a gassy, unmotivated Rampage, and Rampage is the gassy, unmotivated guy in the fight. So
I was pretty gassy on Saturday night too. Yeah. And then, this card started with a WEC fighter and ended with a WEC fighter getting a victory when Benson Henderson defeated Frankie Edgar for the lightweight title. Yeah,
Benson Henderson put a whooping on Frankie Edgar. I don't know what they make people out of in New Jersey, but I'm never going to talk smack about the New Jersey Nets ever again if everyone is as tough as Frankie Edgar. Because that guy takes a beating, and usually, hitting him in the head really hard just means he's going to get off the mat and beat the living daylights out of you. But not this time. I mean, Henderson, completely shattered Frankie Edgar's nose at the end of that second round. I mean, blood was just pouring out of his face. And, Edgar's left eye got more and more swollen shut as the fight went on. And somehow Frankie Edgar didn't manage to pull out the comeback this time. But, Henderson just looked fantastic. His striking was, better than Edgar's. I mean, he outstruck, he landed more punches, threw more punches. Edgar was really good with his footwork, but he just looked like the smaller guy. I mean, he was outweighed by at least 15 pounds on fight night. he didn't have the range. He's used to not having the reach advantage. He darts in and out of range and presents really, deceptive angles when he's striking. But, Henderson saw right through it and just, really, really put a hurting on Frankie Edgar.
And the decision was not without its critics, as Dana White felt that Frankie Edgar won the fight.
I think the rounds were really close. I think Frankie Edgar could have won the second round, and he was probably winning the fifth round. But I think it's really hard to look at a guy whose nose is, shattered in pieces with blood pouring out down his face and say, despite all that, I think he probably won the round. His striking looked better. I mean, this isn't really, I don't think this is going to be controversial like the Nick Diaz, Carlos Condit decision from a couple weeks back. I mean, Henderson landed more strikes, like I said, than Frankie Edgar did. And, Henderson, he doesn't look as banged up at the end of the fight as Frankie Edgar does. Edgar landed some hard shots. I mean, Edgar, I think, landed some of his best punches against Henderson, but Henderson never looked like he was in trouble. I mean, he stumbled maybe once or twice. I think Edgar did knock him down maybe once in the fourth round, but, Henderson, the story of the fight was written on Frankie Edgar's face, not Henderson's.
Yeah, sometimes in boxing, it just comes down to who would I have rather been in that round.
Seriously, and I can't think of any round where I'd rather have been Frankie Edgar than Henderson. I mean, Henderson, looked like the bigger, stronger, tougher fighter, and even actually almost had Frankie Edgar tap out to a guillotine at one point. I mean, it looked like it was locked in tight, and Henderson has vicious guillotines, but Frankie Edgar is just as durable as Henderson. But, really the question is what happens next. With Frankie Edgar, he had to rematch the two people that he beat for the championship, BJ Penn and Gray Maynard. So his camp is sort of pushing for a rematch of his own. I mean, it only seems right that because he had to rematch some folks, he gets an instant rematch too. But Henderson has got to want to get that rematch against Anthony Pettis, who, like I said, beat him for the WEC lightweight belt back at the last WEC show. So, both of these guys want rematches just with different people. But either way, either of those fights are going to be fantastic. And, maybe Frankie Edgar can take some time off and, have his nose rearranged and put back on his face.
Okay, so good luck to Frankie Edgar, and congratulations to Benson Henderson. And that's UFC 144. It's in the books. Thank you, Dominic, and stay tuned for some boxing.